The first thing I remember when I woke up was the pain. Not just the physical agony that shot through my legs like lightning every time I tried to move, but something deeper, more devastating. The metallic taste in my mouth mixed with the antiseptic smell of the hospital room as I struggled to focus my vision on the ceiling tiles above me. Machines beat steadily around me, their rhythm a constant reminder that I was alive, though at that moment, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to be. My legs were suspended in some kind of contraption, metal pins and screws holding together what the drunk driver had shattered 3 days ago. I couldn't remember much about the accident itself, just the blinding headlights and the sickening crunch of metal against metal. What I did remember was the overwhelming worry about my family, the desperate need to let them know I was okay, to hear their voices telling me everything would be all right. "You're awake," a gentle voice said from beside my bed. I turned my head, wincing at the movement, to see a middle-aged Latina woman in scrubs adjusting my four. Her name tag read Maria. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "My family," I croaked, my throat raw and dry. "I need to call my family. They must be so worried." Maria's expression shifted slightly, something I couldn't quite read crossing her features. "Let's get you some water first, and then we can talk about that." The water helped, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. When Maria handed me my phone, retrieved from the wreckage, I saw 17 missed calls from various numbers, dozens of text messages. My heart leapt with relief. They did care. They were looking for me. But when I scrolled through the messages, my relief curdled into something cold and bitter. The texts weren't asking if I was okay or where I was. They were complaints about late payments, demands for money, questions about when I'd be transferring funds for various expenses. The most recent message, sent just an hour ago, was from my brother Leo. "Where's the money for my car payment? It's due today and I don't want my credit affected." With trembling fingers, I navigated to my voicemail. The first few messages were from creditors and automated systems. Then I heard my mother's voice, bright and cheerful, and for a moment my heart soared. "Chloe, honey, it's Mom. We're at the airport right now, about to board our flight to Tuscany. Can you believe it? Our dream vacation is finally happening. The doctor said you'll be in the hospital for a while, so we figured we might as well go ahead with the trip. Don't try to call us while we're gone, okay? International roaming charges are just ridiculous these days." I could hear the excitement in her voice, the pure joy of someone about to embark on the vacation of a lifetime. Then Leo's voice cut in, equally jubilant. "Thanks for upgrading us to business class, sis. You're the best. Ciao Bella." The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the bedside table. Maria was watching me with concerned eyes, and I realized I must have made some kind of sound. A whimper, maybe, or a gasp. The pain in my chest had nothing to do with the accident and everything to do with the crushing realization that while I lay here broken and alone, my family was living it up in Italy on my dime. "Honey," Maria said softly, "is there someone else I can call for you?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry. I just stared at the ceiling and tried to process what I'd just heard. They knew I was in the hospital. They knew I was hurt. And they'd gone on vacation anyway. The memories came flooding back then, each one a fresh wound. Graduating summa cum laude from MIT with my computer science degree, standing on that stage alone because my parents couldn't miss Dad's golf tournament. My first big bonus at 23, which I'd immediately used to pay off their credit card debt while they cried tears of gratitude. Every month since then, transferring $15,000 from my account to theirs for the mortgage, Leo's car payment, their emergency fund that somehow always needed replenishing. I thought about the countless evenings I'd worked late, pushing myself to excel, to earn more, to provide better for the people I loved most in the world. I thought about the apartment I'd never upgraded, the vacation I'd never taken, the social life I'd sacrificed because every spare dollar went to supporting my family's lifestyle. And now this, the ultimate betrayal wrapped in cheerful ignorance. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and well-meaning staff. When I was finally alone again, I reached for my laptop, which someone had thoughtfully brought from my car. My hands shook as I logged into my banking apps, and what I found there made my stomach drop even further. A charge for $25,000 to luxury travel experiences, processed after my accident. My credit card had been used to upgrade their flights, book 5-star accommodations, and reserve exclusive tours throughout Italy. They hadn't just abandoned me in my darkest hour, they'd used my trauma as an opportunity to live even larger. But that wasn't the worst of it. As I dug deeper into our shared cloud storage, looking for travel documents to see what else they might have booked, I stumbled across a folder I'd never seen before. It was hidden, titled Florida Plans, and when I opened it, my world shifted on its axis. Inside were scanned documents that made my blood run cold. A power of attorney form bearing my forged signature, granting my father complete control over my assets in case of my incapacitation. Purchase agreements for a luxury beachfront property in Florida. Email chains with shady financial advisors discussing the expedited liquidation of my tech stocks. bank forms to transfer my retirement accounts. They hadn't just taken advantage of my accident. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years. My near-death experience wasn't a tragedy to them, it was an opportunity. A chance to finally claim everything I'd worked so hard to build. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those documents. Long enough for the sun to set outside my window. Long enough for the shift to change and a new nurse to come check on me. Long enough for the shock to wear off and something else to take its place. Rage. Pure, cold, calculating rage. When Maria returned for her next shift, she found me sitting up straighter than I had since the accident, my laptop open, my eyes clear and focused for the first time in days. "How are you feeling, mija?" she asked, noting the change in my demeanor. "Better," I said, and meant it. "Much better. Maria, I need to ask you a favor. Do you know any good lawyers?" Maria's eyebrows rose. "What kind of lawyer?" "The kind who specializes in fraud. Financial fraud specifically." A slow smile spread across Maria's face. "As a matter of fact, I do. My cousin Jessica is one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the city, but she used to work white-collar crime. Want me to give her a call?" "Please." Jessica Davenport arrived 2 hours later, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting to see specific documents. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Chloe," she said finally, "what your family has done isn't just cruel or selfish. It's criminal. That power of attorney is a federal offense. The unauthorized use of your accounts constitutes identity theft and wire fraud. We're talking about potential prison time here." "I don't want them to go to prison," I said quickly. "I just want to stop them. I want my money back. I want them to understand that they can't treat me like this anymore." Jessica's smile was sharp as a blade. "Oh, honey, by the time we're done, they're going to understand a lot more than that. But first, we need to move fast. They're in Italy spending your money right now, but when they come back, they're going to try to implement this power of attorney scheme. We need to make sure that doesn't happen." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Marcus, it's Jess. I need you to come to Northwestern Memorial, room 412. Bring your camera and your lockpicks. We've got work to do." Marcus Thorne turned out to be a grizzled ex-cop turned private investigator, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen everything and hadn't been impressed by most of it. Jessica quickly brought him up to speed while I transferred copies of all the incriminating documents to their devices. "All right," Jessica said, rubbing her hands together. "Here's what we're going to do. Chloe, I need you to make some phone calls. We're going to lock down your accounts, report the fraudulent charges, and make sure they can't access another penny of your money. Marcus is going to do some digging into their activities, and then we're going to pay a visit to your family home." "But they're in Italy," I protested. "Exactly, which means we have free access to gather evidence. The power of attorney gives us legal justification to enter the property, since technically your father now has control over all assets in your name, including the house." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. I called every bank, every credit card company, every financial institution where I had accounts. I didn't just change passwords, I reported the cards as stolen and the accounts as compromised, triggering fraud investigations that would freeze everything pending review. I canceled their return flights. I called the financing company for Leo's car and reported it stolen, knowing they'd repossess it from the airport parking lot. While I was burning down their access to my money, Marcus was digging into their backgrounds. What he found painted a picture that was both shocking and, in hindsight, completely predictable. My father owed over $200,000 to various casinos and underground gambling operations. My mother had been living a secret life of luxury shopping, with bills from designer stores that totaled more than most people's annual salaries. Leo had been using his emergency fund deposits to maintain a lifestyle that included a high-end apartment, expensive cars, and a seemingly endless parade of expensive dates. They'd been living like millionaires on my dime, and when my income alone wasn't enough to sustain their habits, they'd decided to simply take everything. "We need to move tonight," Jessica said after reviewing Marcus's findings. "I want to get into that house and secure the original documents before they have a chance to come back and destroy evidence." "Is that legal?" I asked. "With the power of attorney, your father technically has the right to access the property, and since that document is fraudulent, we're simply acting to protect your interests as the actual owner." Her smile was predatory. "Don't worry, I know exactly how far we can push this." They left at midnight, and I spent the longest night of my life waiting for them to return. When they did, just as the sun was rising, they brought with them a treasure trove of evidence. The original forged power of attorney, hidden in my father's safe. Bank statements showing the extent of their debts and spending. Email printouts detailing their plans to liquidate my assets. Even a handwritten note in my mother's distinctive script outlining how they'd divide my belongings once they gained control. "This is more than enough for criminal charges," Jessica said, spreading the documents across my hospital bed. But I think we can do better than that. How do you feel about some strategic public relations? That afternoon, with Jessica's help, I created a GoFundMe page. The title was simple: Abandoned by Family After Devastating Accident, Fighting to Rebuild My Life. I told my story carefully, factually, without naming names but with enough detail to paint a clear picture. I included photos from the hospital, copies of medical bills, and a brief explanation of my situation. I didn't expect much, maybe a few $100s from kind strangers. What I got instead was a viral sensation. Within 6 hours, the page had raised $5,000. Within 12 hours, it was trending on local social media. By the end of the second day, I'd raised over $50,000 and the story had been picked up by 3 local news stations. My phone started ringing, reporters wanting interviews, old colleagues expressing shock and offering support, former classmates who'd somehow tracked down my number to share their own stories of family betrayal and financial abuse. And then, on the third day, my family's plane landed in Chicago. I was actually feeling strong enough to sit up without assistance when they stormed into my hospital room, Marcus having tipped me off that they'd landed and were likely on their way. They looked tan and relaxed, though I could see the stress creeping in around the edges. Their credit cards had been declined at the airport when they tried to pay for transportation. Their phones had been buzzing nonstop with notifications from frozen accounts and angry creditors. "What the hell have you done?" my father demanded, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "The cab driver wouldn't take our card. Our bank accounts are frozen. And why the fuck are the locks changed on our house?" "My house," I corrected calmly. "The house that I've been paying the mortgage on for the past 5 years. My mother looked like she'd been crying. "Chloe, sweetheart, there's obviously been some kind of mistake. We would never." "Never what, Mom? Never forge my signature on legal documents? Never plan to steal my retirement savings? Never abandon me in the hospital while you go spend my money in Italy?" The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of my monitors. Jessica, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up and introduced herself. "I'm Jessica Davenport, Chloe's attorney, and these are copies of the documents we found in your safe, Mr. Frank." She handed him the power of attorney. Forging someone's signature on a legal document is a federal crime. The penalties can include up to 15 years in prison. My father's face went white. Leo, who'd been silent up until now, suddenly found his voice. "This is insane. Chloe, you can't be serious. We're your family." "Family," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call people who drain your bank accounts and plan to steal your life savings while you're fighting for your life in a hospital bed? We were going to pay you back." My mother protested. "It was just a loan. We knew you'd want us to take the trip." "With forged documents and stolen credit cards?" Jessica's voice was ice-cold professional. "Mrs. Susan, I'd strongly recommend you stop talking without your own attorney present. You're destroying this family." My father shouted, taking a step toward my bed. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "You mean like missing my graduation? Like never visiting me when I worked 16-hour days to pay your bills? Like leaving me alone in the hospital while you went on vacation with my money?" Security arrived then. Marcus had called them the moment my family had started raising their voices, knowing things would escalate. My father was escorted out still shouting about ungrateful children and family loyalty. My mother was sobbing something about misunderstandings and how they'd raised me better than this. Leo just looked shocked, like he couldn't believe his golden goose had finally grown teeth. The next morning, they received the lawsuit papers, a civil suit for damages, theft, and emotional distress, criminal referrals to the district attorney's office for fraud and identity theft, and a restraining order that prohibited them from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my hospital room. The local news picked up the story that evening. Prominent local family accused of defrauding hospitalized daughter ran as the lead story on 3 different channels. Marcus had been busy, providing carefully selected evidence to sympathetic reporters, photos of my father entering casinos, credit card receipts from my mother's shopping sprees, bank records showing the pattern of financial abuse. Within a week, they'd become pariahs in their social circle. My father was quietly asked to resign from his country club. My mother found herself uninvited from her garden club meetings. Leo lost his job at the marketing firm when the story went viral and clients started complaining about being associated with that family. They tried everything they could think of to make it stop. They offered to pay back the money they'd spent. They begged for forgiveness. They threatened to sue me for defamation. They even tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, claiming the accident had affected my judgment. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, the public opinion was decisively against them, and Jessica was absolutely ruthless in her prosecution of both the civil and criminal cases. 6 months after the accident, I was finally able to walk again, though I still needed physical therapy and would likely always have some lingering issues with my left leg. I'd moved into a beautiful penthouse apartment downtown, purchased with the proceeds from selling the family house and the settlement from their financial crimes conviction. My father was working at a warehouse, loading trucks for minimum wage. The casinos had garnished his wages to pay back his gambling debts, leaving him barely enough to survive on. My mother had taken a job as a cashier at a grocery store, her manicured hands now rough from handling endless transactions. Leo was flipping burgers at a fast food restaurant, his dreams of easy money and endless partying permanently shattered. They'd pled guilty to avoid prison time, but the conditions of their plea deal were harsh. Full restitution, community service, probation, and the permanent restraining order that kept them out of my life forever. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied watching them struggle the way I'd watched them prosper on my hard work. And maybe part of me did, but mostly, I felt free. Free from the obligation to fund their lifestyle. Free from the guilt of not doing enough, not giving enough, not being enough. Free from the toxic dynamic that had defined my entire adult life. I used part of the settlement money to establish the Chloe Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse by family members. We provided legal assistance, counseling services, and emergency financial support to people who found themselves in situations similar to mine. The foundation's first case was a young man whose parents had stolen his identity to take out loans in his name. The second was a woman whose husband had been secretly gambling away their retirement savings. The third was a teenager whose college fund had been raided by his stepfather to fund a failed business venture. Every case was different, but they all shared the same common thread: people who'd been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to love and protect them. People who'd been told that family comes first, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive and forget because that's what families do. But I'd learned something important in those months of legal battles and painful recovery. Family isn't defined by blood or shared genetics. It's defined by love, respect, and mutual support. It's defined by people who show up when you need them most, not people who disappear when supporting you becomes inconvenient. My real family was Maria, who'd held my hand through the darkest moments and never asked for anything in return. It was Jessica, who'd fought for me with the ferocity of a lioness protecting her cub. It was Marcus, who'd worked tirelessly to gather the evidence that brought me justice. It was the dozens of strangers who donated to my GoFundMe and shared their own stories of survival and healing. As I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city lights, I thought about the girl I'd been just a year ago, desperate for approval, willing to sacrifice anything for the illusion of family harmony, convinced that my worth was measured by how much I could give rather than what I deserved to receive. That girl was gone, and I didn't mourn her. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more valuable. Someone who understood that the greatest gift you can give yourself isn't money or success or even forgiveness. It's the recognition of your own worth. The legacy my biological family had left me wasn't inheritance or unconditional love. It was the hard-learned knowledge that some relationships are too toxic to save, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. But from the ashes of their betrayal, I'd built something beautiful, a foundation that helped others, relationships built on genuine care rather than financial obligation, a life that was truly my own. They tried to steal my money, my security, my future. Instead, they'd given me something far more valuable, my freedom. And for that, despite everything, I was almost grateful.